Alright, so here's another tutorial, and in this one I will be painting a lakeside scene. This is just me quickly going through some reference images, and here I am starting out with drawing. As with the cumulus clouds video, I'm just adding a basic framework with the lines. Filling in the sky color, testing out different tones. And here I am applying a base color for the lake. It's brown because the closest edge is where the water is most transparent, and that's where I want the rocks and the sand and soil to show through. Alright, so that would be the tree line and the closer edge. So at this point I'm still figuring out what kind of texture I'd like to have the tree line to have. This is me adding some base tones to suggest dimension, some light and shade on the far edge. So trying out a textured brush. It's good to create as much texture as possible, because that's what helps you depict foliage without having to draw every single leaf. So adding tones over there to create a sense of depth, introducing different colors, adding variety. And I'm using one of the pencil textured brush as well as the splatter brushes for this purpose. So here I'm adding a bit of a highlight to denote the sun hitting on the other side of the lake edge, but I honestly could have used a bolder brush to get the job done, but anyway. So looking at the reference image again, I do a lot of back and forth where I need to. And this is where I'm trying to figure out how I should go about making the rocks. Not very successful, so I go back, take another look, change my mind, overlap the tones, and start putting in just a suggestion of a drawing of what the rocks might look like. And now, this is where it gets a little more interesting. I select patches. So I imagine what the dimensions of the rock are, where each face of it is, where the face that receives sunlight, the face that's in the shadow, and then I segment them out and fill them with gradients. So I just continue this process. And you can already see how even just that much work is already giving off an appearance of being like a rocky surface. This is me adding some of the deeper tones. I'm using the overlay layer setting to introduce a hint of brightness and saturation to suggest the parts where the light is reflecting off the rocks. And here I've already started putting in the highlight layers. So these would be the parts on the rock that are directly facing the sun. So fiddling around with layer settings a little bit, and then going in to add the highlights on them. adding a little bit of texture with the splatter brush. Kind of overdid it in the corner over there. Okay, so I let go of the drawing and I collapse the layers together. Helps me work faster, and to be honest, I feel like I usually don't need all those layers anyway. So I am sort of replicating the same process, but now I'm trying to suggest the rocks that are actually underwater. So I'm not going to be adding too much highlight and dimension and depth on them. So adding some tones to suggest depth by making the water a bit darker, a bit more greenish. Now I'm working on the water over here. So this is where I realized that it was better to do it reverse. Instead of painting the darker lines, I would actually paint the water itself. This is basically a blue gradient coming from top down, and I am using the transparency mask to reveal it wherever I need to. So refining those lines a bit more, adding thinner lines where I need to. I wasn't feeling too happy about the closer edge of the lake. Felt like it needed to be brighter, so I'm just testing out some other tones. And this didn't work, so I went back in to look at the details. And I figured that a better way to translate it was to use these almost circular, flattened out shapes, almost like outlines on the wave crests. I'm not sure how effective this was, but anyway, this was my solution. At this point, I thought I was almost done, but I was not, because I started having some second thoughts about what was going wrong with this image. And the next day I realized that it really needed to show the reflection of the tree line on the water. So that's when I went back in to edit it. So in the selection, using the gradient tool, radial gradient. And you can see how much of a difference that makes. Of course, I was still unhappy with the water, so I went back in and added a more saturated tone, because I realized that in the reference images, that's what it showed. The blue of the water was actually more saturated than the blue of the sky. Adding more depth to the base coat once more, just to increase the contrast between the light of the water and the dark parts. So here I am going in and sort of painting the base edge of the rocks almost, to suggest that the parts that are touched by water, or maybe it's a bit mossy. And there we have the final image.